question. In the past, you'd tiptoe around and you'd almost, because you wanted to get the listing, you'd be scared to ask the questions. We have an attitude now, we'd rather not get the listing than lose our reputation looking for a sale. And so I just think that extra due diligence, get everything done up front, ask a lot of questions, no seller's disclosure, no listing. It's tough. But if you can explain it to the seller in terms of you're acting in their best interest, you can look them in the eye and say, I'm doing this to protect you, this is the way we do things. And a genuine seller will actually appreciate that. The only person that would get offended is the person who isn't who they say they're going to be.
Ingrid, coming back to you, how have you been made aware of these issues of consumer protection, etc.? What are you going through, not just at the training courses, but every day?
Probably within our office procedures, we're just making sure that we have checklists for everything and double checking of paperwork as it comes through, making sure that we're communicating with each other between departments if something comes in that might appear odd or out of the ordinary, so that we're all aware. I think communication's key here, and you know, essentially keeping on the ball with everything, and never, if you're cautious about something, going the extra mile and double checking. So yeah, that's what I'd suggest.
I mean, when you're dealing with individuals, we all have that, you know, sort of giggling voice. You seem to know when something's a little bit off, and I think now you don't become complacent, you act on that little voice, and if you know something's not quite right, look into it further.
There's a saying that if it looks like a duck,
it is a duck.
It sounds like a duck and quacks like a duck and it's got feathers, it's probably a duck. And so that's the whole point about a mindset of due diligence, isn't it? To ask the questions, and if in doubt, I'll just say to an owner, well, the whole thing's on hold until we can get answers to these questions. You know, they might push you to say, I need it open by this weekend, or I need this, or I need that. The whole thing grinds to a halt until we get all the checks and balances in place. And if they don't like that, that's okay, because the speed of how things progress is very much up to the seller and whether they can answer all the questions we need answered before we start doing any marketing.
Look, we have actually come across it, and I think there's probably a lot of people sitting in the room that have, in one form or another, also come across it. The particular incident we had was to do with Gumtree, where we were advertising a property for sale, and in fact the professional photos that we used for the property in the selling of it were taken and put on Gumtree, and the property was actually advertised for rent at a very affordable rental amount, and the only reason that we were made aware of this was through some emails and people contacting us questioning whether the property was actually for sale or for rent.
I bought a property recently in Applecross. It was a waterfront one for 6.6 million, and it was an overseas owner, so I flew to Singapore and I cited the driver's licence and the passport direct as a condition of me doing that deal. In other words, I wasn't prepared to take the risk for the sake, and it was nice to stay at this Marina Bay Sands for 2 nights as well. Which is on the 53rd floor, and
it was all right, yeah.
So it was a good excuse to do that as a legitimate tax-deductible trip.